So you want a retro cool looking bike, but you also want a sporty, aggressive riding position. Well, the Cafe Racer fits the bill perfectly, and so here we go with 9 of the best on the market in 2025, and we're going in price order ascending. That means of course we'll start with the most affordable of the bunch, with the Continental GT650 from Royal Enfield. But if you want something that feels authentically old school to ride, then don't overlook this one as just a budget choice. The parallel twin is air-cooled for some proper soul and sound, and the lack of tech and the fairly basic chassis give it some of the feel on the road of a bike that's genuinely classic. For the adrenaline junkies, that might be a little bit of a turn-off. But on the other hand, if you don't really care about getting anywhere particularly quickly, and you want the most immersive retro riding experience, then this one should definitely be on your demo list. Plus, I've got to say they've absolutely nailed the styling on this one, with the clip-on bars, the long slim fuel tank, and the arrow straight subframe all hitting the mark for a strong Cafe Racer image. If you do want a bit more performance though, then a good shout would be the Suzuki SV650X. It doesn't have anywhere near the classic looks of the Enfield, but being based upon the standard SV650, it offers plenty of fun out on the road for a pretty decent price point too. The 70-ish horsepower 650V twin is a proven performer over the years, and the chassis is easily good enough for the money. Specifically though, this X model gets a mini fairing, some clip-on style bars and some extra graphics, plus a tuck and roll style seat, which give it just enough Cafe Racer appeal to make it onto this list. But really, this one is much more about the riding than any retro curb appeal. I'd say it's best to leave that stuff to the Italians anyway, and there's no finer example of that than the Moto Guzzi V7 Stone Corsa. It gets all the signature Guzzi features that make the standard V7 such a great retro, with the transverse mounted 850 air-cooled V-twin, the long and large fuel tank with the strong shoulder lines, and the shaft drive out to the back wheel for a bit of bonus practicality. This Corsa edition though gets a bit of the cafe treatment, with a fancy silver and red paint job, a half fairing, a racing saddle, and also the option of an accessory seat cowl. Then it's finished off nicely with some bar and mirrors and an anodized fuel cap, as well as a limited edition badge on the bar clamps. Perhaps the only thing it doesn't have is the clip-on bars for a proper cafe riding position, but you could see that as a positive if you want to ride in comfort, so certainly one to look at for the Cafe Racer fan who doesn't do yoga. Also hailing from Italy, we've got the Ducati Scrambler Nightshift, and while you might be thinking it's a Scrambler because of the name, well, it's not really. You see, the Ducati Scrambler lineup is predominantly made up of road bias bikes, with road levels of suspension travel, low slung seat heights, and road-friendly sizes of wheels and tires. This Nightshift version though is the one that takes the most of its inspiration from the more classic style of motorcycles, with bar and mirrors, spoked wheels, and a brown tuck and roll style saddle. Then, with the side number boards and lowish flat bars, it's about as retro cafe as you can currently get from a Ducati. Now, before we get onto the next bike, I'd just like to say a huge thanks to DJI for supporting the channel and making videos like this one possible. Cafe Racers are all about style, and so if you want to capture and share your bike out on the road, then we'd wholeheartedly recommend their excellent Osmo Action cameras. We specifically use the Osmo Action 4 and 5 Pro to shoot our reviews and vlogs, and we love how small and compact they are so they don't weigh your helmet down too much when you've got them mounted on the chin. On top of that, they've got brilliant image quality and solid stabilization, so the footage is always excellent, and the battery life, especially on the 5 Pro, is second to none, so you never have to worry about missing a great shot. We love using DJI cameras to make our videos, and so I'd fully recommend checking out the links down in the description below to find out more. So once again, a huge thanks to DJI for their support, and with that, back to the bikes. Now, it's a sad day not to be able to properly include the mighty Triumph Thruxton on this list, with it being one of the best modern cafe racers built in recent memory. The looks were spot on, especially with the accessory fairing, and the performance was also top-notch, with a punchy 1200 twin and the best of the best in terms of chassis components and hardware. I guess though, the riding position wasn't comfortable enough to give it broad appeal, with a lot of your weight up up and over the clip-on bars. So Triumph decided to discontinue it last year, marking the occasion with a classy-looking racing green final edition. And while you could pick one up used, I guess, otherwise you're going to have to look elsewhere. Now, part of its demise could be attributed to the success of their Speed Twin 1200, which is built upon the same great riding platform, but with a more upright riding position with the flat handlebars that make it much more usable day to day. You couldn't really call it a cafe racer though, although maybe you can with the latest generation with a couple of accessories available that now push it more so in that direction. Whether you choose the base model or the more sporty RS, you can now spec it up with a low handlebar kit and a cafe racer style seat. Then you've got the option to finish it off with a colour matched seat cowl. And so look, granted it's not quite the full Thruxton experience or look, but if you want a cafe-ish bike that goes really rather well, then it's still certainly worth sticking on your shortlist. Also, in the really fast but a little bit retro category, we've got the Yamaha XSR900 GP, although this one more so takes its inspiration from the 80s, as opposed to the 60s and 70s look that you'll more commonly find in this market. This bike gets a lot of the same components as their brilliant MT-09 Naked, including the awesome CP3 triple engine, but then tops it off with a half-fairing and chunky seat unit finished in that striking Marlboro-inspired red and white paint job, or a more stealthy black and grey if you prefer to go under the radar. At around 120 horsepower, it's probably the quickest bike on this list, and I reckon it's not bad value either, although I'd be very tempted to save up a little bit extra for some accessories, like the side-mounted silencer that looks a lot more fitting of the era, and perhaps the fairing lowers too for the full retro sports bike look. Now, it's a big step up in price to the next bike at over £17,000, but Norton's latest Commando 961 is a thing of beauty with fine details in the finish and top-notch suspension and brakes from Öhlins and Brembo respectively. The heart of the bike though is the 961cc parallel twin, which rumbles away and makes a heck of a noise, both of which add to the visceral riding experience of the Commando. Two versions of this bike are on offer, one called the Sport and one called the Cafe Racer, with the only major difference being the flat bars versus the clip-ons. Having tried both relatively recently back-to-back on the same day, I can confirm the Sport is the more practical option, but then again, you came here for cafe, not comfort, didn't you? Like the Triumph Thruxton, BMW's R90 Racer was another staple of my cafe racer lists in previous years, but again, just like the Thruxton, it got discontinued as it never really sold in big enough volumes to make it worth producing. More recently though, BMW updated the R90 platform to the R12, and for 2025 announced this half-faired version called the R12S. This one references classic boxer twin-powered sports bikes with the orange and silver paint and double red pinstriping, and so perhaps you could say this is the successor to the original R90 Racer, although they do seem to have learnt a lesson with the handlebars, with this one sticking to the flats despite the cafe-ish looks. To me, it's a heck of a good-looking bike, and having ridden the standard R12, I guess it goes well too, but the price at over £18,000 is mega steep and puts it well out of reach for most riders. Still, that won't stop us trying to get hold of one for review this year, and so keep your eyes peeled for that video if it looks like your cup of tea. Top of the list though in terms of price, because it's basically unobtainable, is the Honda Hawk 11, and I still can't believe that Honda never brought this bike to the UK, to Europe or the US, because on paper it looks like it could be a great seller. The look's a typical Honda with a bold mix of new and old, and the engine is their 1100 parallel twin from the Africa Twin, NT 1100 and Rebel 1100. With around 100 horses, it should be enough for some fun on the road, and the chassis looks decently spec'd too, with the 17-inch wheels front and rear, the Showa upside-down fork, and the twin Nissin radial 4-pot brakes up front. On top of all that though, I'm led to believe the price isn't bad either, although that's specifically in Japan, which to my knowledge is the only place you can actually buy one. Still, we do have some of our audience in Japan, so that's why I've included it, and while it is a shame that you can't buy it elsewhere, well, at least there are 8 other great options on the list, and so I'd love to know from you which you'd pick down in the comments below. Also, I'll leave our list of the best retro scramblers on the screen now, so you can give that a click and a watch if you haven't already. Do hit subscribe if you want to see more of the latest motorcycle news and reviews right here on MOTOBOB. A massive thanks for watching today, and we'll see you in the next video.